most importantly, people need to have comfort to know that their leaders know what they're talking about on an issue. And it comes with a certain level of authority. Now, the public do not give you authority by title anymore. They give you authority when they think you're competent.
Welcome to the Westminster Tradition, where we unpack lessons for the public service. I'm Danielle Elston, Managing Director of Good Government Advisory, and I have been abandoned today by my co-hosts Alison Lloyd-Wright and Caroline Crozer-Barlow. Instead, I'm fortunate to be joined for the first time by a current minister on the back of the great shoulders of former South Australian ministers John Hill and Amanda Vanstone. Welcome to the podcast, Minister Tom Koutsantonis.
Thank you, Danielle. How are you?
Excellent. Now, I don't think after this long there's many South Australians who don't know who you are. But for our national and our international listeners, Minister Koutsantonis was first elected to the South Australian House of Assembly in 1997 as member for Peak, which then turned into West Torrens in the mighty western suburbs of South Australia, and have been in that electorate ever since. Entered the ministry in March 2009 under Premier Mike Rann, serving as Minister for Road Safety, Youth and Volunteers, then Gambling and Correctional Services, and then adding later Industry, Trade, Small Business and Mineral Resources and Energy. Under Premier Weatherall from October 2011, he continued as Mineral Resources and Energy and Small Business Minister before taking on Transport and Infrastructure and Housing and Urban Development in 2013. Following the 2014 election, Premier Weatherall appointed him Treasurer of South Australia, a position he held until 2018, along with portfolios including Finance, State Development, Small Business and Automotive Transformation. Returning to government with the election of Premier Malinauskas in March 2022, Minister Koutsantonis was appointed to Minister for Infrastructure and Transport and Minister for Energy and Mining, roles you've got today. That's quite a list, Minister. Do you think you've lasted this long because you've never held health?
Yes. Yes.
In all seriousness, for our audience of public servants, that's a lot of different portfolios and a lot of different types of public servants work in those different types of portfolios with different skills, engineers, accountants, the whole lot. But before we kind of get to how they helped and hindered you, you are the father of the house in South Australia.
That's right.
That makes me feel probably about as old as it makes you feel. We're of the same genre. Parliament's a bit of a natural habitat for you. It's well documented that it's a natural habitat. Public servants often observe that what makes a great parliamentarian doesn't always make a great minister. Do you agree with that?
No, I think they're linked. I think the Parliament and the executive are symbiotic in our system. I don't think you can separate them. I think public servants misunderstand Parliament.
How?
Parliament's theatre. Parliament is... Well, sorry, I should restate that. An hour of Parliament is theatre. The rest of Parliament is a lot like the day-to-day operations of a ministry. And I think public servants, for them, it's like the Parliament's like the sun. It gives off light and heat, and you don't stare at it directly. You try and avoid it, but you need it. So it's something that's foreign to them because ministers, our system is so strange globally that the executive come from the legislature. So it's a very, very strange and unique set of circumstances.
Yeah, it's not a job description that comes with like a set of skills and it's not like a public service job ad where it's like you need to have already done these things to do the job. The people elect you and then you learn how to be an energy minister or a health minister from there.
That's right. There's a fundamental misunderstanding by the public about what it is, what is the prerequisite to being qualified to be a parliamentarian.
Yeah.
Because I think, well, what did you study? Energy at school? Do you have to be a lawyer to be the Attorney General? Well, you do. But, do you have to be a doctor to be the health minister or a teacher to be the education minister? And when you take a step back and you say, well, actually, the qualifications for a parliamentarian is a democratic one, not a tertiary one. And the democratic principle is that the public choose their leadership and we have control, that is, we the public, have control over the institutions in this country. And that is what has been lost largely in our democratic sort of discourse. People have forgotten that the public are the ones who choose the politicians and the politicians tell the bureaucrats what to do and how to do it.
Yeah, they set that direction.
Yes.
I will characterise you here as carefully as I can because I still work in this town. But it could be argued you didn't start out as a policy nerd, like a lot of our listeners are. I think we have a worldwide policy nerd network here at the Westminster Tradition podcast, but some of the internet has lots of colourful phrases from your early career: abrasive, brash, impulsive, bobber boy. And I'm only pulling quotes from some of your friends here. So how did you become a policy nerd with the patience for that kind of complex multi-inputs? And how did any public servants kind of play a part in that? I can't imagine in 1997 you had the kind of, here's the economic input, the public sector input, the various kind of how we craft complicated policy. How did you get there? You work in the role you're given. So for the first part of my career in Parliament, I was part of a very small group called Labor Unity, which is known colloquially as the right of the Labor Party. South Australia was late to the cause of Labor Unity. It's always been a centre-left state, or a left state, in the Labor Party, that is. And the right, as it's known, never really had any influence. So my role was to help grow that grouping. And to try and break through, you play the role you have in the jobs you have. And I was convener of the right for most of that time. So when you're not the majority, you're the minority, and you're trying to find your way through this establishment, which has been controlled by two groupings for the last 40 years, it's very, very hard to not get that reputation, because you're pushing against the establishment. You're pushing against an established world order in the Labor Party, something that was unrecognisable, something that today you might say is the establishment. And has been for probably a little while now.
Has been a while.
Are you calling that a success?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Someone's got to own it.
That's right. So, yes, I can see why people would have said that about me. But I mean, it's hard to be a policy nerd when you're a backbencher and you're on the outer. And, you know, we have our faces pressed up against the screen trying to look inside what the decision makers are doing, and we're trying to get in the room. So sometimes you've got to kick the door in. And once you get in the room, you can start talking about policy. But it's very hard because politics has been and always will be a numbers game. It's a democracy. I mean, numbers, the power of ideas are important, but so are the weight of numbers.
But isn't the craft then at the ministerial level being able to do both, like walk and chew gum, I suppose, keep the numbers, and we're all still actually only here to run health systems and roads and what the democratic public have asked us to deliver each 4 years.
That's right.
And so you've got to be able to do both at the end of the day.
You do. I mean, look, I suppose my formative years in the Labor Party were in Young Labor, and I was in Young Labor with Penny Wong and Jay Weatherill and Mark Butler.
And big brains.
Huge brains.
Policy brains, yeah.
And the press pack that we would go out drinking with was, you know, Annabel Crabb, Phil Corey, David Pemberthy.
Well regarded as the kind of renaissance of South Australia,
Sam
really.
Maiden, you know. So there were all these. It was a heady time in South Australia, but policy at that stage of my career came second because we weren't being listened to.
How do you get listened to? Get the numbers. Is that what your argument is? Like, get the numbers, or you get the policy first, or the numbers first, or is it all just a bit moot?
Well, I think, you know, if you've got the numbers and the policy is no good, you won't last very long. The policy has to resonate. The policy has to have some rigour behind it. But it's hard to be listened to. Look, there are plenty of good ideas in the Parliament now from crossbenchers who can never achieve government, can never achieve the ability to implement that policy that they've come up with. Our job is to try and distill that. So I suppose the first part of your question for me was I had to get into the room. And once I get into the room, you can start unveiling the policy
work, yeah.
The policy work. I mean, I've been thinking about policy for a long time, but no one was listening. So,
yep.
But you're talking about how the public service interacted with that. Just yesterday, I heard the very sad news that Peter Severin, who was the chief executive of Corrections, died unexpectedly. He was my first chief executive. The day I was sworn in, he was chief executive of corrections. And he gave me a great lesson in how to implement policy, not policy making, how to implement policy, how to deliver it. And you do get mentors in the public sector who are able to teach young, inexperienced ministers how to govern. And he was very good at not attempting at any stage to influence what the policy would be. His role was, look, if you've got something you want to do, telling me is not enough. Right? You need a platform. And he gave me the understanding of what it is the public service needed to understand to implement a policy. It wasn't just a directive from government. Like I remember,
it's not enough.
It's not enough. I remember in the previous government, the Marshall government, they put out a directive to end ramping. So I just thought, well, that's not going to fix ramping. So,
and public servants can't take, and do sometimes more often now, take cues from media. So we have 20 plus episodes on robo-debt, which actually starts when they need it to buy ICT, so they're waiting for a savings measure, and they hear their junior minister, who goes on to big things, Scott Morrison, say on radio he wanted to be a tough, welfare cop on the beat. That's not an instruction. It's not anything. It's what you do on radio. And I listen to you on the ABC quite often in the morning. And they took that as a set of instructions to brief up what became a monolithic maladministration. And that is not giving direction to the public service.
No. And that
ending ramping, tough cop on the welfare beat, I want better roads. That's not a implementable kind of set of directions.
And the public service should know better.
Yeah. No, the public service should definitely know better from taking advice from radio interviews, but also that craft of your first chief executive saying it's not enough just to say you want it.
That's right.
It's also a craft of ministerial development, right?
That's right. That's right. And he taught me how to pose questions properly of the public sector. And which is another skill that's being lost, is to not look for the answer you're seeking, but to know which question to ask, which is a difficult skill to learn.
That was our number one takeaway from talking to Amanda Vanstone, was that she asked the crunchiest, most practical questions of public servants, not big macro questions, a lot of really practical ones.
Yeah. But we have a responsibility to make... I look at the Commonwealth Public Service and I think they are meant to be the pinnacle of the public sector in the country. But robo-debt tells me that something went fundamentally wrong. And what concerns me is when you see that in robo-debt, is it a function of a public sector in decline? Is it a function of government cuts? Is it a function of a culture change in Canberra? Is it a function of too many commercial agencies doing a lot of work externally for the public sector? I fear for the public sector and the capabilities that they have to be able to do independent work internally and then assess it. There's nothing wrong with getting a consultant in to verify
I have
work.
no problem with that, Minister, to be perfectly honest. But I take your point. I think the other part of that is the Commonwealth delivers a lot less services than the state directly. And so that connection to, like, if you make a decision and it impacts someone in West Torrens on the road, you're going to find out about that very quickly and very personally, whereas the Commonwealth commissions, procures, does frameworks, and they do have service delivery, so just, to all our Medicare and NDIS listeners, etc. But the less service delivery you do, the more it's an academic exercise and the less it's a democratic connection with community exercise.
Paul Keating used to say we should close Canberra and move the Treasury Secretary to Sydney, the Transport Secretary to Melbourne, so they're stuck in traffic and know what it's like to try and buy a house in the Sydney market. In Canberra, it's this artificial bubble. And it never occurred to me, people always sort of joke about the public sector living in a bubble. But when you live in Canberra, you really are in a bubble. And it's unfortunate that Morrison turned it into a political catchphrase, because there is a spectre of public servants not shopping amongst their fellow Australians and competing for them the same way that you and I do in Adelaide or in Melbourne or in Sydney, to understand just the general travails of life and to try and understand. So when you hear a problem, when you get correspondence and you read it, you actually empathise rather than just, well, this is the consequence of modern life. No, our job's to try and assist.
I mean, some of my views on that would be, one, we need more public servants who have done other jobs and lived in a regular world, as opposed to the kind of, I did a commerce degree grad program straight through, no other experience. But the second one is, there's a big movement in different parts of the public service to get your executives out in schools, in hospitals, talking to people, to, again, create that connection to, it's not a set of meetings and PowerPoints and traffic light reports.
Yeah.
Like, is it actually working? Have you filled out the form yourself?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
Caroline's notes for this episode tell me that the Treasurer always seems like it must have the best job holding the purse strings. I don't agree with that. I don't think so. Seems powerful, but also the job where you say no more than you say yes. Was being Treasurer as fun as Caroline seems to think it might have been, or what surprised you most about it, and what do you wish public servants understood about your decision making when you're Treasurer? Because Treasurers amongst public servants, as a cohort, not individually, it's like, right, now we've got to go to Treasury. Oh, what's the Treasurer going to say? It's not usually a fun process, unless you're in a river of gold moment, but I don't know if many people get to experience those. So what was it like being Treasurer? Fun?
I'm not sure fun's the right word. It was challenging. It was very challenging. I was Treasurer at the end of the life of a government, that had snuck another 4 years in when maybe it shouldn't have. We were attempting to try and maintain a level of fiscal credibility while still investing. I had a young, energetic Premier who was very keen on growing the economy. So there was a lot of hard work. I'm not sure it was fun, but it was certainly very engaging. Like you felt like you were being pushed, which was the good part about it. Like I liked the curiosity of it was interesting. I mean, I look back at it after we were defeated in 2018. I looked back at it and I thought to myself, it was more a finance department than a Treasury.
What is that line for you?
Well, Treasury is about growing wealth, not preserving it. Finance is about preserving wealth.
Yeah, right.
So treasuries globally in the Westminster system should always have an eye to growth, always. Like, what is it we can do to help stimulate growth? I fear sometimes that treasuries can be too inward-looking and not outward-looking enough. But the people who were in them, what surprised me the most was the passion that people inside the Treasury had for the state, which was very impressive. I mean, the people who worked in Treasury really want the state to succeed. And you could see it across the country when you went to KIFA and you went to all these meetings. You could see the public servants really wanting their individual states to do well. You could see the Australian government Treasury officials really wanting the country to do well.
That's where that competitive federalism can work.
Absolutely. But of course, what holds them back is the system that we've designed around it for the guardrails. The accounting standards, the way we report things, the two different accounting measures we have for the Commonwealth and the states. All that stuff sets up a very good tension, but it can hold us back a bit.
Yeah. Am I remembering correctly? Did I won't say suffer, but did we do a budget when you were Treasurer where you really line by line, where you got called in and it was like, I think I would have been at attorneys, and it was like, what do these four people do? Not in a prosecutorial sense, but not so much a commission of audit looking for savings, but show me public value to every one of these lines. I reckon that was under your...
Yes. So the Premier, who had been Treasurer for the year leading up to the election, was very keen to get an understanding if there was waste. Because you got to remember, it's one thing to say, when you get accused by your political opponents that there's waste in government, and you come out and say no, the obvious question is, well, how do you know there's no waste? So we went through a process where we thought, all right, let's go through some root and branch, have a look at the government, go through it bit by bit and find out right through the bottom where the waste is. And the irony is that at the end of that process, the Treasury reported back to me, look, is there waste? No, not really. Are there things we could not be doing that we are doing? Yes. Well, and so when you hear things like that, it's really reassuring to know that the public sector is pretty lean.
Much more lean than people have any sense of.
That's right. And there's a cohort of people in this state and across every state who think, if the public sector was smaller, we could lower taxes on land tax, we could lower taxes on stamp duty, we could lower these other taxes. And these taxes are artificially high to pay for this bloated public service on service delivery. But when you look at the public sector, it really is a very lean machine. It is actually a very efficient organ that is doing a lot of work really well. And if you try to recreate it from scratch tomorrow, it would cost you a fortune, a lot more than it costs us now. So I think we should be careful of the cost cutters.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm on the outside, get very unhappy, even though a couple of years on the outside, when you get the public sector lazy, like I get emails and phone calls from public sector clients all weekend, all night.
Oh yeah,
they start at 5 o'clock in the morning, and which was the same as when I was on the other side. I was working all the time, and so I do very much sticks in our craw over here in public sector and civil servant world to hear this kind of like there's some laissez-faire approach to public value and public delivery, and if anything, it's a much harder craft to create public value than it is profit.
I don't think there's a nurse in South Australia who'd disagree with you. It's just, or a police officer.
No.
I mean, it's just people just not understanding the role.
You must be the most experienced energy minister if you started in 2011 and still going today with that short gap. Over that time, the policy objectives of energy changed a lot from kind of cheap to cheap, clean and reliable, and you can't just pick two. Things really hit the fan in 2016 in South Australia during the statewide blackout. Caroline is our resident energy expert on this pod. Everything I know comes from being in the middle of moving house when that happened and in the truck with two houses without power in a storm, followed by what I like to call energy lessons from Coots on the ABC radio in the morning because it's not a policy area that I know a lot about. For listeners who don't know, there was an enormous political pressure from the Commonwealth to say it was a function of our renewable energy policies, and they were tying it to that other issue, which was the high prices. In the end, the government, the Weatherall government, and you were the minister, came out in a way that both doubled down on the renewables and took seriously short-term transition via building our own gas power plant. That was a very expensive intervention and not straightforward to explain to either environmentalists on one side or industry on the other. Plus, at the time, the policy knowledge, like we all often as senior public servants reflected on the fact that there's a lot of health experts, there's a lot of economists, there's a lot of expertise in the public service. But at this particular point in time, there was not in energy, and let alone your cabinet colleagues, with the greatest of respect to them, on reliability and intermittent generation. What do you remember from that whole episode in the sense of how did you get your cabinet colleagues up to speed, and how did the PS public service help or hinder? I'm sure they'll all take it well.
They won't, because I'll be entirely frank, the public sector, we're hamstrung with generational thinking on how we intervene. Since the privatisation of ETSA, it has been a generational hands-off electricity sector now. And we are going through the biggest disruption to energy that has ever occurred. This is horses to motor vehicles. This is massive. And when the statewide blackout occurred, the idea of regulating the way wind farms dispatch and what safety measures they have to have in place, the idea of forcing the rule changes through the Australian Energy Market Commission to allow synchronous condensers to have a regulatory test that would pass, to build your own generator that could compete with other generators, potentially they were terrified of it, to bring in standards that might force investors to actually spend a bit extra money to make sure that all their generators were able to dispatch when needed and have redundancy. It was an anathema to all of them. And
Because it was new, or because it rubbed up against what they believed to be right?
It was new, and it was not how we had done business for the last 20 years. And it was just, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, it was Jay and I just saying, I don't care what you think. We hired Danny Price, and we said to Danny, we want a no-holds-bar assessment of what's going on here. He gave us a blueprint. I had the happy coincidence that I was Treasurer and Energy Minister. And
Both levers, nice.
Both levers, and we were able to affect real change very, very quickly. That set the state up, I think, for nearly a decade of stable, good, secure power. That was also cheap for the first 6 years of it as a result of those investments. So it worked, and it changed the way people thought about renewable energy. So I was very pleased to have done it, but it took a lot of effort. And I've got to say, there was resistance because people just thought, well, we can't do this. Well, yes, we can. Or how can we? Because the cabinet said so. So it was. We got the policy rigor right. The first step was, what was the problem? We need a foundational policy change, foundational policy setting change, and then implementation. I remember driving to the announcement, and I didn't realise how much it had cut through to the public conscience and psyche of what we were doing. There was a person in the car next to me. He rolled down his window and yelled out, "Good luck, Coots, give them hell." And I thought,
Very South Australian story there.
very, very South Australian story. And I thought, this is cut through, but people were waiting to hear what we were going to do in response to the statewide blackout, and it worked.
But you had to explain a lot.
Yes.
To South Australians. Again, this is not I like to think I'm a mile wide and an inch deep in almost every policy area, except energy has always just confounded me. How did you, so there's the public service going, I wonder whether they were actually saying, I don't know how to implement it in some ways. Because often when public service gets nervous and says no to ministers, it's because they don't know what to do next. And so I'm wondering how much was that. But also, how did you take these really complicated, like a combination of market technology ideas and tell South Australians what they meant? Especially if the PS wasn't kind of breaking it down for you in some kind of like nice crunchy PowerPoint.
Well, I mean, I had been Energy Minister for 5 years, and I had been knee-deep in it for a long time, all right? So when I first became Energy Minister, I'm not going to lie, it took me a long time to get my head around it, a long time. I did a lot of reading, like a lot of reading. Most weekends I'd be bogged down in reading some report, trying to understand exactly how this market worked, all the ancillary markets, the physics of it, what was causing the instability in the system, understanding that the state had gone black before, that coal-fired generators had caused black events previously because they're inherently unstable. Understanding basically my year 10 physics about all
coming
these
in very handy at this point.
coming in very handy. But I think in the end, the explanation is taking the complex argument and distilling it into what people understand every day. But most importantly, people need to have comfort to know that their leaders know what they're talking about on an issue. And it comes with a certain level of authority. Now, the public do not give you authority by title anymore. They give you authority when they think you're competent. Now, this is the difficult part about this conversation.
Yep.
Is that your political opponents will never think you're competent, no matter what level of competency you display. So it's a tough ask. So I knew we had to explain everything we were doing in a way that people could understand, but I also knew that there was no chance of me ever being able to convince everyone what we were doing was right. So it was just a matter of playing through it. Once you understand that, you can explain complex things because you know you can't win. And once you surrender to the fact that you can't win, I can't convince everyone in the room, it's liberating. And when you're liberated to talk about a complex issue, it's much easier.
Yep. So you'd been minister for 5 years. various former ministers and senior public servants often have a view on this pod as to how long a minister should be in a portfolio. I can't remember what the exact time Amanda Vanstone said, but she liked enough movement that like you could lift up the rocks whenever you got somewhere, and if you were there for a really long time, sometimes you could get a bit stale. What we noticed, again, back to robo-debt, but also the post office in the UK, there's more, which is 5 ministers in 6 years tells you no one's ever read the Act. Like no one's even flicked through it before they moved out into another portfolio. Is there a good amount of time to stay, recognising that these things are at the behest of various political processes? But if you had your own way, what do you think the ideal amount of time in a portfolio is? A long time or a short time?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I think it depends on the minister. You know, I'm inherently an iconoclast.
Yeah, right.
Right? Okay. I am not someone who's part of the establishment, despite being the father of the house in the parliament longer than everyone else. I am someone who always feels as if someone's going to turn up one day and say, "What are you doing here?" You know, it's the Labor Party. It's our Labor Party culture, right?
100%.
We're always on the outside looking in. We're not part of the establishment.
It's also a working class culture.
It's a working class culture. It's a working class thing. So that gives me the. I remember driving in the car with Don Farrell on the way to when I was working for him, on the way to an EB negotiation, which was not going well with the company. And I remember saying to him, "Why don't we just agree, get this 2.5%, and then just move on and try and fight for something else?" And he said to me, "If we don't do it, who's going to?" And I just remember it sticking with me. And it's the same thing with the public sector. So I'm always inherently curious about what is happening. And I've reached a point now in my career where I have the authority and I have the experience to be able to tell the public service, will know how far I can push them to change something. So I suppose that your question is double-edged. A new minister won't have the time and the experience. It takes time to get up to speed. Once you get up to speed, you're probably on the way out. Once you're on the way out, you can't put the changes you're wanting because it looks desperate. Having come out and come back in again, I think that time gives you the experience and the authority to actually make real change. So I'm going to say, I'm going to lean on, if you're a good minister and you're curious, longer the better.
Yep.
And I look at John Howard. John Howard's career in 1985 was over. He had been Treasurer, he had been leader of the Liberal Party, and he had lost an election.
Souffles don't rise twice.
Blah, 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 right? Coming back in gave him a perspective that many Australian Prime Ministers hadn't had since Menzies, which is, I've had power and I've lost it. I've had time, a long time in opposition, and he knew the authority he had from day one. So I think a long time is better. But I understand Amanda's argument about becoming complacently or intellectually lazy about things you've done. But I think if you've got experience, you always go back. I mean, I keep my incoming briefs, right?
As you should, because we've done 2 episodes on them and public servants slave over them. Our other co-host, Alison Lloyd-Wright, is going to be delighted that they're being read.
But I keep them on my iPad. And whenever I hear something from a public servant, I'll go back to my incoming briefs and see what the briefing was then. And I'll ask, what's changed? What's changed?
Yep.
And it's a very powerful, very, very powerful tool to have. And sometimes you don't tell them. And you just got it there as a reference point. Like I grew up in a time before the internet, right? So I was at school when you're looking up Encyclopedia Britannica and, you know, reading books and trying to get references, right? So I've still got that skill where I'll go back and check what someone said previously. And I've been blessed with a very good memory.
Yes.
So that plus the written word and the evidence, when a policy change comes, it's very useful. So I'm going to go back to, I think time is useful.
I mean, for public servants, and I'm sure ministers hate to hear this because you come in with the how am I going to get what I want out of the public service, which is perfectly appropriate. Public servants have that, how much training does this one need? Like, is this one going to understand the basics of, you know, our industrial agreements or all the things that make change sometimes tricky? And so, like, I think too much change in portfolios means that you never get your feet off the ground. Like, you just never get past that first learning in order to be able to make the difference. So lots of those really big essential policies are difficult to communicate because, and when you've worked on them, it's like, you know that if you pull this lever, something else pops up somewhere else. You save money here, you spend money there. The macro idea is great, and it turns out the service delivery is never going to line up with it. You have become that kind of expert at bridging the policy, the economics into that political communication. I wouldn't argue, having gone and had a look back 20 years ago, no one starts as good as they are now. Was there anyone that got you there, or was it just practice?
Practice.
Just keep doing it, and it gets easier over time?
Practice. There's no pill you can take.
Yeah.
There's no book you can read. I hear this a lot from politicians, you know. Well, what do I need to do? You need to practice. You know, the idea that you can make a speech and be a good orator from day one is ridiculous.
Yep. It
takes practice. And it means getting up and shaking in front of your first speech. And it means getting things wrong and forgetting people's names. Or you've got to fall over and get up. I think it's just practice. There is no natural talent that you can have as a politician that will get you here. It's simply some people practice and others don't.
Yep.
Look at Jimmy Chalmers now. Jim Chalmers is probably the best explainer of complex problems we've had since Keating. Now, I'm not saying he's like Keating. I'm just saying he's good at a grab. All right? That wasn't there 5-6 years ago. It's there now because he's practiced. So I think.
Do you think being naturally plain spoken helps?
I don't know. I don't know if that helps.
Because like the way we speak in the public service to brief you as a minister is often about 100 words a sentence too many.
Yeah.
And it's not. Again, if you've got an economist and then an engineer and then a scientist all trying to brief you, it's all in like not a set of language that when you get on ABC is going to help you much.
This is the way I've learned how to do it. I would try and talk to, when I first got on radio, I would try and talk to the people at home listening, and that was a mistake. I now consider myself having a conversation with the person who's interviewing me as if I'm on the telephone with them.
Right.
And every now and then, I mean, I've got a mind, I know I'm being broadcast, so I'm not naive, but I am talking to them the same way I would talk to them in private, with the natural guards that I would have in place as a politician, with the explanation that people are eavesdropping, who are the listeners. And that has given me a great deal of ability to relax when I'm on radio and being able to explain things easily. It's no different to explaining to my daughter where I'm going to pick her up after school. You know?
Oh, God, don't.
So if you
got the longest description from a 13-year-old on the weekend about effectively what turned out to be the corner of Hindley Street and King William Street, but the instructions I got included buildings and McDonald's and...
Yes, they're talking code.
He cannot go on radio. He would not be able to explain anything.
Yes, I think it's just... maybe it is plain spoken, but I just think it's also understanding that you're just having a conversation with people.
So you said you've been around since before the internet, as have I. In fact, my second day at Commonwealth Health in 1999 or whatever it was, the second day was the tour of the records. And it was an entire building out there in Woden, and like how to find all the records. They just rolled out computers on desks, but they didn't do anything. Like they were for typing, and that was about it. So I think the South Australian Cabinet was the first to put cabinet papers on an iPad. Someone will inevitably correct me if I'm wrong. The disruptive change in technology and media has left ministers with less time for reading. I'm kind of unable to be convinced otherwise. And I would say less skills for reading really long documents. I'm hearing in some jurisdictions they're wondering whether to trial shaking up how you give a minister informations, infographics, PowerPoint, and God no, please not PowerPoint, but audio, like in a TikTok world, basically, with all of our attention spans, mine included, shorter than they were in 1997, the idea of 30-page briefings seems to be it seems to be not landing with ministers as well as it used to. What do you think, and how do you get your best information from the service? But is reading long documents dead?
Well, then if it is, we're in serious trouble.
Okay.
Ministers are overwhelmed. I'm not going to lie, right? The amount of reading that's on my iPad is horrendous. It's just horrendous.
More than 2009?
No, I think it's the same.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's the same.
Just more other calls on you.
Yeah. Look, I had forgotten how much correspondence I get as Transport Minister when I was last Transport Minister, and it is overwhelming. So you put things in place to try and deal with it. But the reading is important. Now, look, you prioritise, right? There are things that I don't need to read over and over again, and there are things that I need to learn. And I suppose the hard part of being a minister is knowing what you need to learn, knowing what you don't know, and knowing what you do know. So, if I've got a briefing on, say, the North-South corridor, there's a foundational briefing and you get updates.
Yep.
All right? Now, a good minister will know they don't have to read the whole thing over and over again.
Just what's new from the last fortnight, month,
right,
whatever it is, yep.
But every now and then you go away on a holiday, you come back, you need to refresh. So the reading does take time. You've got to rely on staff and you've got to trust staff, all right? I expect my staff to read everything I've read, and if I've missed something, to raise it with me. You set up checkpoints, but I fear public servants should not assume that ministers don't do the reading. I think they should still put it down. I think they should still have the 30-page briefings. And if ministers aren't doing it, they'll get caught out and the system will work and those ministers will move on. I think
that's interesting, because there is a sense that you've really got to get that first 3 lines because ministers aren't reading past it.
Well, if they're not reading past it, it's to their detriment. And if they're not reading past it, they'll get caught out. And if they're caught out, they'll lose their jobs.
And I'm not talking about this jurisdiction or and including around the world and,
That's the system, right? That's how the public separate the wheat from the chaff. I mean, that's what you have to do. You get the reading, you do it. If you're caught out, bad luck. That's my view.
Yeah. I wonder, with our kind of increasing openness around diversity type issues, whether the audio version because not everyone does absorb all their, people learn a lot from podcasts now. So people do learn in different ways, and I wonder whether we will end up briefing ministers differently over time. But your position is we still need to be able to knock through those kind of slightly dense, complicated briefings in writing.
Yes, I am not in the school of Reagan and Trump where they get one-page briefings on really complex issues.
Yeah.
No, give them the proper briefing. If they don't want to read it, they don't want to read it.
But you've acquitted yourself properly by providing it, and after that, it's up to the minister. Absolutely.
And if you've got a bad minister who won't read the briefs and then doesn't understand it, that minister will get caught out, and the public will get a better outcome because that minister will not last.
Speaking of things that have changed, I have a long, well-aired view on this podcast that public servants should always call a minister.
Why?
Pretty simple, which is, whilst I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, not every public servant personally likes or admires every single minister, but that admiration for the office is different, and you will always, always do your best work for the office of the minister, for the ministerial office, effectively in our system for the Crown, under any circumstances, under any kind of ministerial arrangements. And I suspect it would have been a sackable offence when you started and when I started for some junior public servant to use the minister's name, let alone first name. And now I reckon it's about 50-50 taking up the offer of, just call me Tom. Where do you stand on the relaxation? So you're down with big reading, but where do you stand on the relaxation of the convention of always calling the Premier, Treasurer, Minister, regardless of how the kind of equality model now, which is here's my name, just call me my name?
I've always thought that sort of thing is bullshit myself.
Yeah, right.
I'm not... I'll put it back to my Republican roots. I am not for establishment. I'm not for lords and titles. I think we are all here to serve the public. Calling me, I know when a public servant is serious when they say Tom.
Really?
Right? So I have some trusted public servants who have been with me a long time. Mm-hmm. John Whelan, Vince Duffy, before that David Reynolds when he was under Treasurer, under me. If I was making a mistake, I knew I was making a mistake, or they wanted to make a point to me and reinforce it by coming into my office and saying, Tom, you've got to look at this again. And I think that level of personal interaction can work well. I agree with you on one aspect. In public, in front of other companies, if I'm meeting with the Australian energy market operator and I am trying to ask them to do something, public servants will call me minister in those meetings. In the preparation for those meetings, titles aren't necessary. I mean,
I can see that I am going out like the dodo here. There's no question that everyone we've asked, I am going out with the dodo.
It has its role, but it also has the consequence of elevating ministers above their station and making them feel as if they are infallible.
Sometimes they're pretty good at doing that all on their own without us helping them.
Well, it's because you
not all ministers.
Well, my kids joke sometimes when I'm not listening to them. They come and say, "Minister," right? But I just think ministers need to be a bit of humility. Never goes astray.
No. Thank you so much for your time, Minister. I've just realised I'm completely unsupervised by my Crows colleagues here on the podcast, so I could actually take you on a tangent where I live out my dream and we turn this into the Port Adelaide Football Club podcast and the governance lessons that are applicable between football and politics, but I won't, mainly because it's 2026 and for you and I that is not the year to start a...
You mean like announcing the change of a coach a year out?
Yeah, are we pro, con, succession planning? How's it turned out?
Badly.
It's been
a disaster.
Let's move on.
Who would have seen it coming that you can appoint? You can say to a coach, you're not going to survive the end of the year, and then you announce their successor. So who do the players, one, listen to? They listen to the coach or the successor. And no matter what the outcome of the season, you're getting fired.
Yep. I mean, to quote a senior person in South Australia, there's got to be one throat to choke. There can only be one person in charge.
That's right.
And there's got to be an accountability model.
That's right.
So there are, we can, grand hopes for next year.
Yeah.
We are not journalists here at the Westminster Tradition, so we've never really had a scoop. But seeing as you're the talk of the town at the moment, Minister Koutsantonis, and you have a microphone in front of you, are you retiring, or do you aspire to work with South Australian public servants until you can drive all the way along South Road?
I will be a candidate for as long as the Labor Party allows me to. She's the one who's brought me along, and she's the one who's going to get rid of me, or the people. It's up to them, not me. I'm up for it.
Well, no scoop there for us then. Today's winner of the Westminster Tradition mug, of course, is Minister Koutsantonis. Minister, these are highly guarded and regarded by public servants, and so should you find yourself owing someone an apology, this will work really, really well for you.
Never apologise, never resign.
Till next time.
Just some appropriately bureaucratic disclaimers. While we've tried to be as thorough in our research as busy full-time jobs and lives allow, we definitely don't guarantee that we've got all the details right. Please feel free to email us corrections, episode suggestions or anything else at thewestminstertraditionpod@gmail.com. Thanks to Pampot Audio for our intro and outro music. Till next time.